I'll second it. The motion was made in second. Roll call, please.
David,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Frank,
Aye. Then the motion carries, the minutes are approved. We want to do the recommended correspondence. It's in your packet. For your review. We'll move into public comment. We want to do Joe's report here, or why don't we do it from the all? Why don't we move him to department reports?
okay,
So we can move forward. With that, we will turn the floor over to Martin or Judas for review of the.
Sure, quick update on the water project and then on the Black Lake sewer study. So on the water project, since you received the grant and we were authorized to begin design, you're really not updated, we're in the middle of design, so. It will be a lengthy process, especially with, a new treatment plant as part of the project. Got quite a bit more work on that than we do some of the other aspects of the project. We're replacing water mains and adding new mains, so. Really, the only action item I have on the water project is to secure a BAN, bond anticipation note. So we had talked about that previously. We did get in touch with your attorney, Andy Silver. He was going to work through the same bond counsel. Was it McGill? Is that what we
Yes,
figured out? Tim McGill, who assisted in writing the bond resolution last year for the project. We got a response from Andy. He had reached out to the bond counsel. The bond counsel seemed a little bit confused about where we stood. He mentioned that you're going to need a seeker and you're going to need a bond resolution in order to take a ban. We had to remind him, we did all that last year, and Tim, you actually wrote the bond resolution, so. I haven't heard back from Andy since, and I guess that's the only question I have for you is, have you had any correspondence with him on them securing a bond anticipation note? And just to back up, what it's for is, your project is fully funded with EFC. And they do provide short-term financing at 0% interest during the course of completing the project. At which at the end, you roll that over into the grant and the balance goes into the long-term 30-year 0% loan. However, EFC takes 6 to 8 to 12 months to close on that. To get things moving with design, you're gonna start incurring costs way before you have the EFC financing. So what most communities often have to do is do a bond anticipation note, some short-term borrowing directly from a bank to bridge the gap from now to the EFC financing. And the EFC financing will pay off this ban. And then you just use their financing from that point forward. So this is just a short-term bridge to cover you financially with project costs to the EFC closing. So
Do you
I
have
guess
any idea of the rough range of the costs that we're talking about financing?
short term, just to get us to EFC closing, I think we threw a number at them around $1 million or so. Out of the $10 million project, we just need $1 million to get us going until the EFC financing becomes available. But that's the only thing to follow up on, not that we have to do anything on it now, but it's just kind of an action item to follow up on and make sure he's moving with it. And if that, I know some bond councils are comfortable with, securing the ban, some don't. They just write the bond resolution and then you end up having a separate fiscal advisor assist with the ban. Either way, doesn't make much difference. We just need to know if he's actually gonna do it.
I will So he responds quite well on the texting.
Okay. So on the back side of that update is, similar kind of bullet outline for the Black Lake Sewer Project. So this is probably the first time you've seen any of these figures. Any of these cost or schedule or anything of that sort. So we have both this bullet list and we have the separate document that, has kind of a project description. With the project costs, the user rates and such on it, and then the map on the back. So, obviously the focus area of the study was the entire length of the shoreline of Black Lake that's within the town of Morristown. An area, 10 miles in length, but with a lake that's known to have, water quality issues. It's listed as an impaired water body due to phosphorus levels. Which, there's a lot of efforts historically and ongoing to address that at the lake. Sewer project could make a big impact on that as well.
What would one do if you wanted the impact, the input from the residents along there? That's something you would put on the.
I'm assuming we'd probably do a survey, wouldn't we? Like
Yeah.
we did on the water.
Right, and that's something we'll get to, but yeah, that's probably the next step in the process. So, I mean, you see the project description, that, there's 2 pump stations and then, transmission to a sewer plant. The flows are, about 125,000 gallons per day. Estimated from approximately 622 EDUs. The total project price tag is 56.3 million. Which when you look at what would be probably the best case scenario from a funding standpoint, it really boils down to a debt service of $879 per EDU. And then with short-lived assets and operation and maintenance estimated costs, we had a total of $1095 per EDU. So a monthly cost of about $91. And that would be a brand new treatment plant. So I'd like to kind of talk mostly high level about the project tonight with maybe some discussion about some details that you have particular questions about. But I really think something of this magnitude will warrant like a work session where we can do a presentation and really kind of dig down into the particulars of our evaluation and the factors that drove it to be what we have developed here in terms of where the plan is, where the discharge point is, how the project costs were developed, what type of collection system it is. It's a bit much to do tonight at a board meeting, but I do believe a project of this magnitude warrants it. We certainly know that, as we had done with the water project, there's going to be a lot of questions that the public will have. And the more we arm you with information, the better equipped you will be, because they probably won't be calling me at my house in the evening. They'll be calling you and they'll want to know.
Your number.
They'll want to know, they'll see you at the post office, they'll see you around town, and they'll corner you and start asking you questions about the project. And so we want to make sure you have a thorough understanding, and again, more than we can probably dive into. But we needed to at least introduce you to the project as we have developed it and scoped it to this point. You flip over to the back side that shows the map. Again, you see the collection system spans the entire, what do you call it, the western and northern shoreline of the lake. And has a transmission line that goes over to just about the Briar Hill with a discharge into the Chippewa Creek.
Well,
So we looked at several options for treatment. We looked at a transmission line all the way back here to your treatment plant in the old village. We looked at a treatment plant right on Black Lake and discharging it right back in. And, also the option you see here on this page with a new treatment plant at a separate water body. What really drove, this is, costs and regulations. So to discharge right back into Black Lake, you know, DEC let us know right away that we would have to do, I think, a pretty extensive evaluation on how much phosphorus we're going to remove from the lake in order to then discharge whatever comes out of the treatment plant. Now, I mean, theoretically, if we're taking 600 septic tanks out of there and replacing it with a treatment plant where every gallon gets treated entirely through the process, there should be a net decrease in phosphorus. However, the investigation and evaluation to determine that could take years. And to quantify how much phosphorus is going in now versus from the treatment plant, it'd be very difficult to quantify what's going in now. How many of those 600 septic systems are failing? How many have direct discharge? How many are working, but still their discharge ends up making its way to the lake with some phosphorus in it? So it was pretty clear there's gonna be a lengthy and perhaps challenging evaluation to put the treatment plant on Black Lake. The other option was to pipe it all the way back here to the hamlet. And first of all, we would have a capacity issue. The treatment plant, as it sits and permitted, capable of treating now, would not be able to receive this additional flow without significant upgrades to the plant. So not only do you have a much longer transmission line through very shallow bedrock, you also still have the cost of upgrading the plant. Which left us with, you know, looking at, are there other water bodies we could build the plant on nearby that have a shorter transmission line, and we wouldn't get pushback from DEC, that we would have reasonable effluent limits that we could meet. And that's where we arrived upon Chippewa Creek. It is going to require us to meet intermittent stream treatment standards, which in layman's terms means creek that doesn't even flow at times. So they are pretty tight treatment standards, which means, I mean, typically your effluent limits are a little more liberal if you're discharging a much larger body of water. You know, dilution is the solution. So when you're discharging the St. Lawrence River, you don't have phosphorus limits or anything like that, right? You've got a huge dilution ratio out there. You're diluted, or you're discharging into a very, very small stream that is even considered not flowing at times. You've got much tighter treatment standards to meet if you don't have the dilution. Not immediately at least. So even with that, the cost of building the plant there on Chippewa Creek with that shorter transmission line would be more affordable than sending it all the way back here to Morristown and upgrading the plant. That's kind of the comparison of the treatment alternatives in a nutshell. You know, the collection system, we looked at, you know, either gravity or low pressure. Like I said, I didn't look at a vacuum. Had enough experience of that, removing the bridge. And, you know, we looked at low pressure probably being the preferable solution. Again, with shallow depths to bedrock, the nice thing about a low pressure system is that, you know, it's very similar to a water main. You only have to keep it below frost, just 5 feet. Whereas if you have gravity, if the ground stays level, that pipe needs to keep sloping down, down, down underground, and you get into 6 foot, that 7, 8, 9. When you have shallow bedrock, that just increases cost quickly, and you have to continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into that bedrock. So that's how we arrived upon the type of collection system and the, you know, location and type of treatment that we ended up with. So we are, you know, at a draft point of the engineering report. What lies ahead? Well, 2 things, funding and an interest survey. So we wanna,
We're scaring our highway superintendent away.
that price tag?
No.
Retirement is that.
The added work.
Oh, you'd probably bump his pay considerably.
Is that factored in?
Actually, the operation and maintenance, we put Dink on a placeholder on the treatment for that.
My question is, when we, if we had a informative meeting, is that figured into what we are now compensating you for? Or is that gonna, there's a meeting?
Yeah.
that we run? Okay.
Yeah, so, and I can talk about these next steps, some of them are in our current contract, some aren't. Obviously, completing the engineering report is part of our current contract with you. Even the interest surveys are part of our current contract. Completing the seeker is in our current contract. And listing the project on the intended use plan. So it's the sewer version of, you know, the water projects funding program. The only additional would be if you pursued a WIA grant and a WQIP grant. Two separate grant programs. In addition to listing it with a funding agency. Those require separate applications. Those would be the only additional parts. So the next steps, and I list those different funding programs on that, bullet list. I list the different programs and when their deadlines are. To be on the intended use plan for consideration of clean water financing. That's due May 30th. And you have to be on that list to even apply for the WIA grant. So that's the starting point. You list the project with the FC by the May 30th deadline. So we'd have to have the engineer report finalized by then. 7 weeks or so from now.
So this figure here, this 11, I'm gonna round it off $1,100. That would be without any grants coming in, is that correct?
That's with the grants.
That is with grants.
It is with grants, and it's an assumption of grants, or perhaps a grant scenario.
So we have a lot of camps over there. Say if one game, well, Mel has like 20 cabins, does he pay 20? EDUs, or, you know, I don't know how.
Yeah, we went through and did an assessment of each property. I mean, we could look that up and see, you know, for each property, what we came up with for an assessment on that.
The cabin was either a quarter or a half.
Okay.
So we figured like, we don't have washing machines.
Right.
We don't have. You know, you're not doing probably as much cleaning in the cabin,
So if he has 12 cabins, it's 3 EDUs,
probably 3 to 6.
3 to 6.
I can't remember. I can't remember my number.
So
Given the
the,
number of EDU and the cost of this project, is grant and loan financing plausible?
yeah, so it's not a slam dunk, but it is certainly possible. So what we had put in the funding scenario is a $25 million max WIA grant and a $10 million max WQIP grant. So we'd be maxing out 2 of those grant programs that I have on the list, with the balance of it financed over 30 years. So that's where that user cost comes from, is that scenario of funding. Again, it's not a slam dunk, but there's certainly a reasonable path to it.
Mhm.
In fact, I you know, the recent funding environment for water and sewer being very good. I have a client that got their project 140% grant funded. So much that we decided to add 40% more to the project to finish using the grant. That 16 million grant on $11 million project. Can't make any guarantees, never make any guarantees on funding. It's a competitive environment still, even though there's a lot of funding available. But yeah, we were pretty successful with the water. Even after we had to go back to the well and try to ask a second time, we were still pretty successful with that. We tend to have, pretty good luck with our funding applications and getting projects funded. Like I said, it's not a slam dunk, but there's certainly a reasonable path to it. We're not proposing anything that's highly unlikely at all. I think there's a reasonable path to this amount of grant.
On this operation and maintenance, back to that,
Mhm.
without a doubt, we'd need to add another staff member, that would be reflected in this, would it?
We have. Not necessarily, we have, kind of a fixed amount in there, they're probably 20,000 for operation per day,
They quoted me 60,000.
60.
I reached out to Dank and I said, hey, if you did this, I know you have a current contract, but like, what would you want me to put?
I got that, but I know also that Dank is not gonna take care
Of the collection system,
of everything,
yeah.
that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, we have the cost of replacement of short-lived assets, which would be, in a low pressure sewer. Each home has its own grinder pump.
So it'd be like the E1 system in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're familiar with that level
Is
of
that
maintenance.
these problemsome for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So replacement of the pumps based on their life expectancy is all factored in. In that cost, it's under the short-lived assets.
Okay.
So, again, I would like to take a deeper dive into this with you in a separate session, but, for tonight, I want to talk about the next steps. And like I said, some of those are already under our concept.
And then the deeper dive, you're talking with this group,
Correct,
now,
correct. Yeah, where we can actually put up some slides and show you some of these numbers, in detail. You can see how things were calculated and,
If you think the water is a tough sell going down River Road East and stuff, this is gonna be twice as bad. So how much money we got in with you right now? And what's left for you to give to us?
Our contract is 60,000, but you got a $50,000 grant for it. So you're only out of pocket on this, study was 10,000.
Yeah, you can probably see where I'm going here. I'm not gonna keep throwing money in there. You know what I mean? This one, 3 times, how much tax dollar money went into that
with the,
with the water?
So like I said, the interest survey is already in that contract. We would send that out for you, compile the survey results for you and, give you the numbers as to who wants it, who doesn't. Is it, the 40% want it, to 50, to 60, to 70? That way you have that information to make your decisions going
And that's
forward.
included in the money already.
Mhm. To apply for the WIA and the WQIT this round, those are things that aren't in our contract. You will need to apply for the WIA, your seeker done, which is in our contract to do for you anyway. And you will need a bond resolution. And it can just be, term like an ersatz bond resolution, which is a resolution that. It's a resolution for a bond that really doesn't authorize you to bond. It's one that's kind of used simply to check the box on the funding application. However, the way it's written by a bond counsel, it requires you, after you have the funding offer, if you actually are awarded the grant, to do a new bond resolution that actually authorizes you to move forward. But you would have to do the preliminary bond resolution, you would have to do that prior to the funding application being due. They have not announced the WIA program this year yet. Last year it was due mid-June. I don't know if it's gonna be late June or July or when, but you would probably wanna be prepared to pass the bond resolution by your June board meeting if you wanted to apply for the WIA grant. WQIP was due in July last year. You don't have to have the bond resolution passed for that, but if you're gonna do the WIA, then we would have it done for that, and it actually gets you more points for the WQIP grant application, because it shows more project readiness. That you've taken steps to move forward with the project. So the steps are ahead are this, you would, we would send out the interest survey. Pretty much immediately now to get that rolling, and try to get some results back by May or June. Start the secret process. Now, the way that your board meetings fall on the calendar and the way the secret process works, you will need a special meeting in order to get the seeker in by your June board meeting. Only because once you pass part 1 of the seeker, you have to have 30 days then before you can do parts 2 and 3. There aren't 30 days between your May and June board meeting, the way those dates fall on the calendar.
Can't we just do the interest survey first and then the rest is next year?
You can.
I don't wanna rush things, I don't wanna get into spending more money, I'd rather have a survey before I make a decision. I don't know what you guys.
I'm more comfortable with, yeah, before we throw a lot of money at it.
Yeah.
To know where.
Well, again, the seeker is still part of our services now, that's not additional. I'm just saying, if you do get interest survey results back that look favorable. If you decide in June you wanna apply for the grants, it's too late, if you don't start the seeker in May, that's all.
So the
It just, we're gonna do the secret for you anyway, and there's no cost to you, it's just a board meeting, it's just your time to meet for 5 minutes and pass a part 1. So, but that's up to you. But it would just prepare you to be able to submit the funding applications. If the surveys come in and they look favorable to you.
What's the consensus here? Who's on the phone? Yes.
Have to hook up.
What's that?
Do the others have to hook up, or do they have to pay on it?
If they own a parcel, they would have to pay any EDU charge. I don't think they get an exemption under that under state law.
I'm just curious.
Here goes the smoke alarm.
They property taxes, right?
Yeah.
So, Lane.
Hi.
Hello. So I'm looking at the calendar, your June board meeting, second Tuesday is the 10th. In May is the 13th. So if you pass it on the 13th, you don't have 30 days to June 10th. So just backing up from that, from the June 10th date, you'd have to have a special board meeting before May. Probably. Because May 10th is a Saturday, the 9th. If you have it that night, we wouldn't be able to get the letters out to the involved agencies the next day on a Saturday. So what I'm suggesting is it would have to be May 8th or earlier.
As long as we're not, there's no more outlay.
Yeah, I'm not,
Does that change your,
I'm not gonna throw more money at a dead horse.
well. That's not what we're saying on this.
No, I know that.
Yeah, so you're good if we move in this.
As long as it's included, but yeah, I
Yeah.
don't see this going anywhere, I really don't. I'm soured on the water deal, it should have went, but. I don't, the sewer's gonna even be a tougher push, I think.
All right, so why don't we then set when we can have this other one-on-one with them? Does that make sense?
I mean, we could do that at the same meeting. If you'd like.
So,
We could do that at the same meeting if you'd like.
the seeker and expanding.
And a more complete presentation on the project. That's up to you.
That makes sense. So when we want to talk about that date,
I mean, from now, I would just need a couple weeks to get the seeker part 1 documents together. So I would say anytime after. somewhere between maybe April 28th and May 8th. Somewhere in those 2 weeks.
I always forget to bring my calendar.
And by then you already have like their surveys out, informational surveys.
Yeah, it'll probably take us about a week to get them out from now. at least.
I'm just thinking if you're
Yeah.
gonna go into the depth of the project, more people might come
Right.
to it, you know,
Yeah.
kind of know. what's-
Yeah, they should have gotten letters by then.
Yeah, at least had them, you know, and then maybe come and listen to the information.
Yeah.
Frank,
Yeah.
Tuesday, the 29th is within that window that Matt's talking about. I'm gonna be traveling starting on Thursday that week, so. So the 29th, for instance, would be great by me.
Okay, well, I'm just, yeah, I'm
It's a
checking,
Tuesday night.
I'm checking my commitment, cause I have to be in,
Oh, that's right.
Massachusetts here at the end of April.
What day? 29?
Tuesday the
But I
29th.
am-
That will work for me, I'll be back from Massachusetts,
I'm good with it.
so don't we set that, what out,
April 29th?
Yeah.
What time would you like?
gentlemen,
No, time, 5:30 or 5:30.
5:30,
5:30? Okay, that works.
hopefully by then I can put my snow brush away. In my vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, that way at least it leaves the option for the
That
funding
work for you?
applications open. If you choose not to pursue the funding application, so be it, but if you do, at least it leaves that option open.
Yeah.
By completing the seeker. And again, it's completing it at no additional cost, which you've already incurred.
Excellent, okay. Anything else? No?
No, that's probably a big enough pill for you to swallow tonight.
Okay, I've got my marching orders. Andy.
I would just wanna clarify one thing on the flyer, so I don't want anyone to be confused if you look at it closer. Under the project description, it says 622.25 EDUs. Under the financing chart, it says 646.75. The reason for the difference in those numbers is there's 622.25 water using EDUs.
Oh,
So, or
If you say
sorry,
that again, there's 622.
622 worth of EDUs that will be hooked up. There are vacant EDUs in there, usually a half EDU per vacant parcel. Or maybe it was a quarter,
And they make up that other
Yeah, and-
24 and a half.
yeah. So that's why those numbers are different,
mhm.
and it should have. It should have explained that.
Excellent, thank you. Happy trails back home.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
See you later.
Huh?
Take care.
See you later. Did I hear from Andy? I'll let you know.
Yeah. I got a call,
Yeah.
do you have water billing software you guys use?
Right now it's Williamson.
Williamson.
Yeah, just wanted to let you know. Okay.
Yeah.
Good thing you have a memory, kid.
I know.
Well, no.
I remember out there, it's 120.
I,
Now you're at 600.
I do believe David already has the temperature of the.
Some of the consensus, yeah.
I just think the campground, that's gonna be a huge hit on that. I mean, they like fishing.
I don't, not that I don't think this is definitely worth it.
Oh, no,
By
no,
all
I mean,
means,
just-
but, I mean, we couldn't even sell water.
Mm. The thirsty people.
People that really needed it.
So,
Probably your campground, but you're bigger.
That's like, I think like Mount McClear and then like you beat 10, Dave Roll, 8 people like that.
We got that and what's got all the camp.
That's like good.
very good. Okay, here for public comment?
Sure.
Well, I thought we might as well
Yeah, if you're accepting.
We've had conversations, all right, so go ahead and we will address your,
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you guys started at 6, so I didn't mean to be rude coming in. Yeah, I don't know if anything really been touched on as far as my neighbor's beautiful spread over there, but was kind enough to share pictures of the vermin that my wife found. And I'm telling you, if I was home when she found it, I would have brought it to share with you. She got rid of it before I got home. I'm not kidding when I say, if I start getting visited at my house by rats, I'm bringing them for everybody to play with.
you do know that it doesn't necessarily mean it came from that spot. Cause I get rats in my place because of the.
Frank, I've lived on that road,
I'm not.
and my in-laws have lived on that road their whole life.
I'm not
I
trying
have
to,
not seen a rat on that road ever.
well, I'm telling my experience, and I'm not defending or saying that I don't wanna see that structure taken care of. But I'm just saying what I've experienced. So anyways, why don't you tell them where we are on this?
Well, the notices went out, like we've had many discussions on it. So they're due back on the 20th of this month. I've gotten one response from it. He was not one of them. So we've got till that deadline and then we follow through with our law, so we have to at least give them that much. New York
Okay,
State
I guess
says-
when we left last time, I guess I was under the assumption it was gonna be a 30-day notice.
It is, that's
For
20.
response.
Yeah, that's.
But fortunately, not unlike, I'm sure, renters. There's a lot of times more power and more drag time than what we would like. And then tell them about your conversation.
Oh, we had after the last meeting, because we were talking about funding and stuff. Joe had brought up about, the county had money, so I reached out to the county, and that is
Right.
only if they're, delinquent on taxes. So basically, we're on, same scenario, we're on our own for.
Because we were going to, as you may recall. I spoke, and we were going to go over to Canton to dig into that, and then we found this out. So the only process we have is the one we're using now. And unfortunately, it,
Has taken some time to even get put in place,
yeah,
exactly.
it's not lack of desire. Okay? Due process, unfortunately, takes a lot longer.
Yeah, the process isn't 6 years, Frank. I don't know how long you've been town supervisor, but maybe it's been that long or longer.
Since the burnout, you mean?
Correct.
You-
It was there when I started. That's about 3 years.
Happened in January or February of 2018.
I think didn't we have to change we did a new,
Not for the unlawful structure.
no, we didn't, okay. But
But I
anyways,
know, like,
it is-
Greg, when he was here, when he was, active code enforcement, like, he left notice on there, Chris had left notice on there. I don't know where the follow through is, you know what I mean?
well,
And it's not like anything against Greg, because Greg and I got along beautifully. and
maybe you can
respect each
explain
other,
it because,
But,
What about the public health avenue of it? I mean, if there's truly the rats running around there,
which I've not seen anything until just recently, and I shared it just as soon as I got it.
if you got the county health department to respond, which I'll speak a little more freely now because I'm currently unemployed. It's a very slow process and it really doesn't amount to much unless they actually can view the rats, view the problem and deem it a public health threat. Then they'll take some action, but they're in the same boat you guys are in. They don't have any money to put to the problem. So, but if you could deem it a public health threat, you very well may be able to speed the process of going in and trying to eliminate what's causing the public health threat. If there's food product in there or anything like that. But it's
who does that? Explore.
St. Lawrence County.
They'll
Public
come and
Health.
explore it.
If you file a complaint with them, they might do that.
Is it
They're
worth
not quick. They used to have a sanitarian that would come around and do
it?
it.
So can we have these two parallel?
You certainly can.
Okay, well, then what's the harm? I'm doing that.
And if you find evidence and can document the evidence, that's, builds the case much better, especially if you can document it with a couple neighbors. You know, we're getting
I'm
rats.
pretty much the only neighbor though, you know what I mean? Cause then like Frank says, if he considers himself a neighbor, he's never seen a rat over there on 37, you know what I mean?
Yes, I have seen that sort of 30.
Well, I mean, it's an avenue you can travel down. I'm not saying it's a solution, but that's what they're there for. And when there's actually a public health issue, which means it's spread beyond the property into the public. Okay, that's how they have to deem it. And they're gonna look at it, you're gonna present evidence. They probably would put it in front of their full board, because that's how they act now. They don't just do it. Just that one person had a little more power. And then if they deemed it to be a public health threat, they would actually issue under 1309 of the public health law, I think it is, or something like that, 1409.
So
So,
the village got that house tore down behind the apartment building. Was through the public health.
so sometimes it can be a tool.
Well, let's travel down two roads at the same time, see which one comes up first or. gets
Well, after those
results.
30 days, what's the next step, then we can move on, like move on what?
Getting that, well, you'd have to go through the, Jim would have to issue, we'd have to issue tickets and then. Go through that process.
Ultimately, the town would pay for it, right?
And put on the tax, is that all? Put on the
I guess we
tax.
love you.
We'll do more or less a lien on the property.
So that's the process that we're under. So that what unfortunately, what we found out is. That it comes back here. So that is the information we can share tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
So when Jim gets it, then he got, what they have another 30 days after that.
What's that?
When Jim gets it, he can issue tickets, something like so many days to.
Whenever he can get it on the docket, or usually quicker turnaround than 30.
I mean, then he gives them how many days?
I'm not sure, what I've never.
That
been
usually
through-
goes around twice, doesn't it? When you're,
It can
Or
go
three.
long time.
And that's Snyder,
No,
okay, I'm gonna say,
so, yeah,
probably great, good job, alright. Thank you all. No. Yeah, that'll be well reviewed.
Good night. Okay. Let's move in. Any other public comment? Would you like to address what you're here for tonight?
Sure.
We don't have that.
Sure. In your packets, you have an email that I forwarded to Frank, that I sent to Channel 7, and I sent to North Country Now. And it's about FEMA's remapping the St. Lawrence and water bodies, not just St. Lawrence. All through this, it's a regional approach they're doing, but there was a public comment period. Or not a public, there was an official comment period that FEMA put out for folks like you to comment on. That time frame, I believe, is now probably gone, and I'm assuming that Frank told me he did send something after I talked to him on the phone. There's opportunity to have some comment about what they're doing. So, you know, this rolled out, I think, in 2019, they started the process, and I was actually in Ogdensburg at the time, and I was part of their first meeting that they had. At that time, they were talking about raising BFE, and for clarification, the BFE is the base flood elevation level of the water bodies. They were talking about raising the St. Lawrence 2 feet additionally, which would move the base flood elevation much further back into people's properties. So naturally, you know, I'm a waterfront owner and that concerns me greatly. But it also concerns me as a taxpayer because the ramifications of changing the BFE is great. So what I wanted to talk to the board about is just to kind of educate you a little bit. This can get really in depth, in my famous term to Frank was people start glazing over when you try to make them understand what could happen here, but. In your packet, you have a map, and that map is my property, so I'll speak about my property because it's mine, I can do that. There's two maps in here. The first one is the flood map that is the map currently being used by all code enforcement, all people that are associated with establishing the floodplains and where that BFE is in regards to the shoreline.
Is that the one in living color?
That's black and white,
Okay.
okay? So you can see it, and I wrote across it, the scale on that map is 1 inch is 1,500 feet. So you can see there's just some shadowing along shores. And as a former code officer, looking at that map, trying to decipher where somebody's base flood elevation is near impossible. And they will admit it. So that's why one thing that, you know, that's why they want to change the BFEs to a digital map so that people have a better understanding where things are. So the colored map is what is proposed for change. And that's what was sent out to all you folks in an email. And it gave you the opportunity to look at it. So this is under, obviously it's under a proposal, but it probably won't change greatly because that's where they're showing the elevations to be. So how does it change? How does it affect Morristown? You're probably asking yourself. They're proposing to change 50 parcels in the town of Morristown to be in floodplain. So that their structures will be deemed to be in a floodplain, okay? Where they might not have before through your code officers, through anybody doing, you know, some determination from them old maps. And so what's gonna happen is, as you can see, there's a pinpoint on that map in there that you're seeing right there, and that's my house. And I'm gonna stand up and maybe point to things as I'm working this crop a little bit, but you can see in the map that this new brown shaded area will encompass about 3/4 of my house, which is going to put me in a flood zone, right? So how does that affect me? If it doesn't affect me currently, it would affect me if I wanted to refinance. It would then, most banks will have a mandatory requirement that you obtain flood insurance. All right, so if anybody knows anything about flood insurance, you know that it's a terrible policy, it's an expensive policy, and it has a huge deductible on it. They basically are gonna make you have it. It doesn't pay well, and in some cases, the deductibles are as high as $40,000 before they'll start paying. Okay, I've done a little talking to an insurance agent. And then, so keeping these dollar amounts in your head as we move forward in this conversation, you're also looking at a very high premium. The premium is based on the cost of the structure, the value of the structure, and the structure's ability to withstand flooding. Okay, most of all of these properties are older properties, and they don't have the ability to withstand flooding. So they're going to get a very poor rating, which is going to give them a 5 rating is the worst. Someone would expect a $300,000 structure with a 5 rating to pay probably in the range of $800 to $1,000 monthly. Okay, so what's going to happen here? You have to ask yourself, you know, as this changes and people, none of us are going to make it out of this alive. Somebody's going to own our properties, right? We're going to want to sell it. What's going to happen when you try to sell your structure and potential buyers come in and realize that not only do they have to pay very high taxes on it, probably a high purchase price on it, your regular insurance, throw another $1,000 on flood insurance. To go down, are you gonna be able to sell this structure? You know, what's gonna happen to Morristown's tax base as this moves forward, you know? So that's something to think about, I think, as a taxpayer, it's very concerning to me, because I just think as we move forward, that these properties are gonna be very hard to move unless somebody can buy 1 or 2 properties, 3 properties, get enough land to build on and meet the code. So I'll roll into the codes that we have. Right now, Morristown requires that, for you to build on a structure, a waterfront structure, you have to be 30 feet back from the BFE. Okay, before you can start your structure. Now, that's administered by your floodplain administrator, which is Lisa. All right, so if you look at my property, for instance, and if that was a blank piece of property, and I wanted to build the house that I have on it right now, from that brown line, I would be 30 feet back, which I can tell you from my dimensions of my property would put it on the other side of where the house currently is. Most of these lots are not a very deep lot throughout the river. I mean, it's great if you can get a couple acres with it, but it's not common to have that. So what's gonna happen to that property if you wanna try to develop it? You're gonna be back into the back of the lot, trying to build a structure. Where are you gonna put your septic? You can't put it in that flood zone. Where are you gonna put your well?
Isn't it all out of the sewer line?
You can't put it there. No, this is all
No.
on the outside,
Oh,
okay? So where are you gonna park your car after you build your house up by the back of your lot, you know? And then the other thing that goes through most of these properties is a nice power line that you have to keep 15 feet from before you can build something. So my point is, a lot of these lots are gonna be unbuildable. Especially if somebody wants to tear the camp down and put a new house in, you know, which is what's happening a lot more and more. So what can Morristown do? You know, that's what I kind of asked myself. I'm going in front of the board, I'm crying. What can they do? I don't really know what you can do when you're fighting federal government. But I really think you need to be involved with this as it keeps rolling forward. One of the things that I had to do when I first started in Morristown is I had to deal with the regional DEC floodplain administrator. And this gal loved her job. Lisa probably worked with her in but she came at me with a list of 14 properties. And she had these properties all deemed to have the structures built in a flood zone. And wanted me to address them, even though the properties were all built before I started, some of them as far back as 10 years ago. And she wanted me to go to them and tell them that they built illegally, because she says there's no statute of limitations. All right, so I looked at her and said, "You're nuts. You know, how do you expect me to do this?" One, they've got a valid certificate of occupancy from the past code enforcement officer. And 2, what do you think the town's gonna do about these properties that are already established in their living room? Well, you would have to take them to court in order that they make changes to their structure to make it flood proof. Well, that's not gonna happen, right? Unrealistic, the whole conversation. I put her off forever. Finally, I couldn't put her off for any longer. She kept coming at me. So I went and looked at all these properties, and of about the 14 of them, probably 10 of them, I could easily defend that they weren't in the floodplain based on the 1985 map that you see. Now that you got these new ones, right? So I have to ask myself, what's gonna happen when they get this new digital map in place? And this gal comes along, she's retired, but there's somebody else there, and says the same thing to Lisa. We now have 50 new properties, because there's 50 new ones by the remapping that are in a floodplain. What are you gonna do about it? You know? Obviously, when they have digital maps. So what can the town do? Well, I think there needs to be some assurity that they're not gonna go back at all these properties and say, hey, you know, you have to do something, or, you know, the end result was, they said, if the people didn't do anything, and the town didn't do anything, FEMA would establish, a no flood zone ever to the property. So never could you get, not flood zone, sorry, flood insurance. Never could you get flood insurance on the property. That would be the end result if they had to interject to the thing. So you say to yourself, okay, great, we're not gonna live forever. The next guy, bank mandates it. Unless you got a pile of cash in your pocket, you're not gonna be able to buy that property because you can't get flood insurance on it. So what can the town do? I think that that's something as we move forward with this, that you have to get some assurances from FEMA that they're not gonna start going back and DEC on people who are now put into a flood zone that never were because of poor mapping.
How do you stop this flood zone thing you're not doing?
You're not gonna stop it. What gets me on this map, if you look at it,
But there's no way to go back to the 19, what did you say?
it's a 1985 map, so the map just.
Right.
No, they're going with a digital map. I mean, this has been in play for.
No, but the
6
places that
years.
were there before this map, can't they be grandfathered in?
This DC flood lady told me there is no grandfather. Violation's a violation.
No. Can all of
I
the
know myself.
owners, because do a class action suit against them?
You'd have to take on the federal government. I mean, this is something that, it's not gonna go away, but what can we do to try to protect the folks and
Yes.
protect the tax base
I
that we
mean, I
currently
kind
have?
of feel it's something, we were compliant at one time, 1985, 1986 at one time, I just can't believe they can. Say, no, you're done, I mean, I guess I
Can I ask a
can, but I
question?
can't, yeah.
I bought my camp in 2020 and I am in the flood zone and they told me that I needed exactly what you said and it was some unbelievable amount of money.
Mhm.
But the guy who did my survey was Larry Shepherd.
Mhm.
He says for $1,000,
Mhm.
you pay, I'll get you a variance.
Mhm.
It took a week and a half and I got a variance.
You didn't get a variance, you probably got a LOMA.
I don't know.
Which
I
was
got.
what I was
Okay,
going to go
okay.
into. So that's one way of fighting it. If in
It's a
fact,
Loma.
it's a letter of map amendment, is what it's
Okay.
called.
You were in a floodplain as high up as you
I
are?
know, I was just thinking that.
So that's one way when you're as high as you, if you believe you're not in a flood
Federal
zone.
government.
They said, and Larry said,
I could be in a floodplain for Christ's sake.
he wrote a letter and he said, in order for my camp to be flooded, Ottawa would have to flood.
Right.
It was 70 miles out.
You're gonna get
So I
stuck
got,
on top
I have
of the
something,
top
so I
of
didn't have to
the
buy
top.
it.
But that's a
Okay.
formal process. The LOMA is it's a 35-page application. It has to be done by a surveyor, okay? You can't just say, my property's high. They have to do their work, send it in with the application. Federal government looks at it and they will determine if you are. It's per parcel. It's not general throughout.
So the town
areas.
couldn't do one and get a Loma for
No.
all of them?
No, because some are truly in flood zones. So there's some properties we know that are they're in a flood zone. And I'm not saying that they should be I mean, we shouldn't be allowing people to build over the water. But when you're truly back from the water and you're deemed to be in a flood zone.
And then another 30 foot, yes.
And then throw another 30 foot onto it, it's right. Now, the Loma that you paid $1,000 for is a little bit more today. I talked to a surveyor. And I said, what are you getting for your Loma applications? And he kind of laughed at me, said, I hate them. And he says, I won't do one for less than $2,500 anymore. Because there's so much work.
34 pages.
Yeah, and you have to keep going back and forth with the federal person, and that's what they do, right? But on top of that, the Loma application used to be free, still is free right now. When the last floodplain meeting I went to, they said those applications are now going to have a fee associated with them. Do you ever remember what the number was with that? How much?
No,
They were gonna raise this, they were gonna raise it up to it, and of course they are, because they probably anticipate that there's gonna be people filing for them, and they don't wanna be bothered with them, but.
And they see this.
Yeah, it's dollars, right? This whole program bails out the flood insurance program, because if you're required to have flood insurance, which is failing, we all know it is because of everything that goes on in the country. The more people you got involved sharing that dollar amount, the better off they are. So again, this is big government, but what can the town of Morristown do? Well, be active in the process and make comments and demand answers about how you can protect your folks now, about these that are now being placed into the flood zone, and they got whacked. That was a huge number, that got put into it, which you're on cliffs up there. You have to ask how the hell they even got that way, but
So they have to pay the flood insurance, all that, no?
if you finance, you're gonna be mandated to do it. So, and this will probably, I think it spills over Black Lake, I didn't look over at Black Lake, but, the other thing that maybe, as, you know, because your code officer is your flood administrator, is, you know, maybe you ought to be looking at these setbacks. And, you know, what you can do to help somebody that might have a parcel that's only 200 feet deep and are gonna be placed into it, you know, 30 feet. That's 30 feet from the BFE, not the shoreline, not the edge of the shoreline.
Around back there.
That's that number right back there, right? So, you know, could that help somebody have some developable space on their lots? And try to get a septic in and try to get a well into the thing and work a little bit better. Again, it's not a great solution because I do appreciate setbacks. I think they're good. But this is gonna have some huge ramifications on it, I think, as we move forward with it.
You wouldn't suggest that it has to have anything to do with the setbacks on the side though, do you?
No, it's not outside unless, you know, it comes up, but
Well, if it's-
unless you're living in a bowl or something and the water comes up to the sides, but, yeah, it's big, you know, and, essentially, I just don't know how, I feel sorry for the code officers, because I don't know how, you know, you gotta look at the homeowner in the eye and say, I'm sorry, but nah, you can't do it here, you know, you can't put your leach field out there, it's gotta go back there, well, that's where I wanna put my house, well, make your house smaller than that or something, you know, I mean, it just, I think it has some huge effects, and I don't think the federal government gives a damn about what the towns think about it, and, you know, how it can affect your tax bases, and
So who you're on the contact?
there's gonna be a process.
There's our thing out right now, the deadline for the public comment, it was April 4th, but the county got involved because Canton was throwing an absolute fit. So they've extended it, FEMA was nice and extended it to the 30th of April. And
Okay,
then-
it did go to the 30th, I didn't
Yeah.
think it went quite that long, so
Yeah.
there's still time for questions.
We tried to get some, so I'm disappointed, I talked to a lot of people and was hoping that they would come tonight to
Yeah,
educate themselves.
you know, like I said, the only time this is gonna affect people is when it starts hitting them in the pocketbook, you know, whether they're looking at flood insurance or they're looking to sell their property and they can't because, you know, you gotta add $1,000 to the monthly payments, which is making it unreasonable. So, you know, I would urge the town to write a letter about the questions that I just asked. You know, how will you deal with people that are placed in it? Is there grandfather? I mean, if there is, can you give it to us in writing that there is?
Won't be anybody left working for a chemo by then.
Probably can.
Oh,
I'm
Leo.
honoring now, but I can probably share with you a little bit. Jesus.
What do you mean, is it getting closer? to
Oh
fishing-
my God,
fishing time?
well, my season's opening up. But,
Talk about ungrateful.
well, I'm educating you and I've given you in this email a lot of information that, I know Sean's gonna read it when he gets home, because he's really good about that kind of stuff. But, yeah,
If you could.
yes, I could,
Appreciate it.
but
Frank, will you forward the address that it should be sent to all of us?
Frank, are you drafting another letter then, cause you have one in the packet, or?
That I sent to, that was about generally, but we're gonna put another one together.
Or-
Yeah, a little more.
And,
Making sure you want-
Yeah.
Do all the people who own the properties know that this is
I doubt it,
coming?
I doubt it, I doubt it.
But you know who
It's
they
on the
are, the 50
website, all that,
properties,
right?
should you notify them?
I don't know if this is.
I sent
like,
Frank, which I think Lisa has it too, the map that is in the email that was sent out for the public officials to comment, the draft
Oh, yeah,
floodplain map, and that's out there, so,
there's a whole slideshow, too, that they just put up.
yeah, there
But it
is.
was funny because after they had announced the public comment, portion there, everybody was up in arms about wanting to get it extended. They've canceled 2 more of the webinars after that because I think they're like crawling into a hole now.
Is there something to put on the website or?
Well, that's what I wonder too, on your website, could you actually take that draft map? And put it on your website for people to look at to see how it affects their properties, because. That's the other way you're gonna get people to squawk is if they realize, oh, you know, just not, hey, I'm in a flood.
I'm also wondering in our newsletter, if we can refer the people to the website, just a mention of it,
Right.
this could have.
It's not open yet to the public comment period. It will be. There's a time frame in that whole packet that says in 2026. This isn't supposed to roll out. Now, this, you know, we're not in, this is gonna happen tomorrow. They're talking about this is supposed to happen in late 27. If it's federal government, probably roll over to 28, that they'll put it into place. But the more that you can get any of your legislators involved in stuff like that, that could make changes to the state government requirements, especially in floodplain. I think that they could have input on that.
I mean, if you're already there, that should be definitely done.
Well, yeah,
You think?
Okay.
so that's kind of what I wanted to bring your attention
And
to.
then, you know, and then we'll just. Yeah, put in knowledge is power.
Yeah.
We'll put it on.
So in 17 and 19, Greg, I mean, was your house affected bad? I mean, that's the highest I've ever seen the river, but I mean.
So
I know,
in 19, the flood elevation was 248.6. That is when we, anything over 248.6 flood elevation is when we determine it to be a flood. We expect the river can go up to 248.6 and down to whatever, but once it crests that, then it's considered a flood. So the interesting part was when they originally rolled it, I wanted to raise that BFE by 2 feet. That really bailed out the federal government in a lot of aspects, because if they raised it 2 feet, it has to exceed that number before the president declares it a national emergency, which triggers FEMA. Otherwise, FEMA doesn't have to pay a penny, right?
So that's why they're doing.
Oh, there's no doubt. So, but the fact that they've left the BFE at 248.6, and which is probably from some pushback, you know, I think they did have some, the meeting I was at, there was only 2 of us at the meeting. It was very poorly, but they had, the federal government was layered with people at that meeting. They had people there from everything, DEC, to flood insurance, to, you know, everybody that's involved with this, and, you know.
So where did the water come in 19 to your place? How bad was yours?
It came up on my front lawn.
That's it?
Yeah. Yeah, it never could get back to where they're showing it right now. If it did, it would be essentially 2 foot higher, 3 foot higher than.
You know what it was back then.
That's what I was wondering, yeah, like I was just trying to.
Yeah, no,
visualize.
my dock was flooded, my front lawn had, you know, this much water on the front, maybe a couple, 2 dogs running around and playing, but that was what it was. But you know, the other interesting part, and is you recording it?
Yeah.
Shut it off for a minute. The interesting part is, you know, when you apply for a LOMA, there's 2 types of LOMAs. One's a regular one, one's with fill. If you were to fill the front of your lawn because you felt the need to do that, you're supposed to do that through a permit with the DEC and the federal government, and you're supposed to do it under an engineered design, right? They don't want dirt to go into the river. So, that being said, St. Lawrence County, a couple of years ago, had a grant out there. And they gave many people money to build, it was a shoreline resiliency something program. And they actually gave people money to build their front yards, to put in stone, riprap, or in some cases, they put in these big blocks that were staggered, and everybody's lawn got raised. I mean, everybody had enough of that crap, so you raised it up, right? You didn't go through the permitting process. The government paid for it. You didn't go through the permitting process, and they don't recognize that it's higher because you didn't
Didn't go through the process.
Right. So,
So that's where Loma will help on that.
it will, but it's gonna cost the average homeowner probably $3,000 by the time they're, to fight it. So, it's just another kick in the butt, really. But anyway, that's what I wanted. I will sit down with you, Frank.
Okay, I'll just stay in touch and we'll.
Yeah, and we can draft something up and address some of the issues, but I really think that we need to safeguard it there
We
today.
need to do whatever we can do.
Right. That being said, I have a 93-year-old birthday party to go to, so thank you for listening
You're
to me.
celebrating your birthday?
Yep. My mother-in-law, 93.
Wow.
Thank you.
Good for her.
Parties all weekend and now.
Yeah, yeah.
Russell Lake.
Yeah. Jersey Mike's. Huh?
Jersey Mike's.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Okay.
My list.
You're all back.
Oh, Jesus.
Now,
Be for sale.
move it back over down to where the swamp is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into old business.
I got
Old
this.
business Financial report,
Looks good.
okay. Everyone has it. We've done item number 2. Okay, we are now on to the bid for the digging of the lots in the cemetery. AP Lawn Care and Snow Plowing, Jeff Carroll, I would like to place a bid in for all of Morristown Cemetery. On a 3-year contract for all burials and foundations. As the general contractor, I will furnish all equipment and own insurance. I also carry workers' comp on my employees. Here are my burial prices: full burial and urn vaults, $700. Cremation, babies, $500. All burial cremations will be an extra $200 if done on Saturday and $300 on Sunday. I seem to recall that last time. Or holiday, extra $150 after 5 p.m. on any day. Winter burials, December 1 to May 1 will be a double the price. Disinterment, double the price of burial. Lot sales is $100 per lot sold and $60 per pins per deed. Owner and any research that we have to go to the cemetery, so they will be a minimum fee of $100 charged to the family. If there's a larger rock than my equipment can handle, the town will be responsible for the extra charges. Foundations prices vary by size. Does that sound similar to the last one? We remember that. You haven't been going big boulders? It's the only game in town, people.
Right, I mean, I remember that.
So,
Isn't that along the lines that we paid before, the $650 or something like that?
600, I think it was. So. I make a motion or something.
anybody have a second?
Sure. Go ahead, guys.
Chris,
Roll call. Pass this back on to you.
David, Sean,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Frank,
Aye, the motion carries. We accept the bid. For the opening of the internment. At the cemetery. Our next item is applications for part-time seasonal.
I think should that be executive
This next item,
application. Personnel, right?
We can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's table that, let's finish up the new business. And then we will address those applications. Parks and Recreation Grant. Anne Marie, you have the floor.
We're always looking for grants for the stone mill to see if we can get something going to continue what we're doing with it, and we came across municipal parks and recreation grant. And we've been working with. What's their name? North Coast on the other grant. And so I called them and we started here, you can have a statement. So I called them and I asked them if they could have you 115. We called and I wouldn't have an extra one for you, Lisa. So we called them and we asked them if it was something that they thought that they could help us with, and they volunteered. They're not charging us for this. They came up, Dean and Frank met with them. We went up and we looked at the park. There's $1 million available. We won't get $1 million. And I'm still operating on the Gretzky, approach is, right, if you don't take the shot, you won't get it. It's a 10% grant, and Fourth Coast is coming in with, some proposals. We talked with them about doing the bathrooms, big thing, making them handicap accessible, and so that's one of the pieces that will be in there. Redoing the courts, and you talked with them more about that, so you want to say something about?
He was gonna have a couple guys, he had taken some pictures just to see if we need to basically redo them or if they can be fixed. I mean, the tennis court or the pickleball court now is getting pretty bad. The basketball court's not bad. They'd like to expand it to a full size court. That was all part of the grant process. And he was gonna take care of that or
Yeah.
organize who to get or, get pricing quotes or
On the
whatever.
playground.
So the bathrooms down here, they're not handicap accessible? right
No,
now?
the ones over to this part.
Oh, okay.
This is up
Chapman.
They're talking about making them unisex, and so only one of them would be. handicapped.
Right. Anything else that you can think of? Oh, new playground with equipment for little kids. I think that they would probably, I don't know, does the gazebo need a new roof? No, the gazebo
No,
just had a new
yes.
roof, right? I think he was talking about benches, putting in benches. They're talking about putting in more seating and picnic tables.
Lighting,
Um,
lighting for the.
Yeah.
and lighting for the courts and so forth. So they will have something for the next meeting, but the grant is due on May 2nd. You signed a form for the preliminary seeker, right?
Yep.
When's the next meeting after that, right? Yeah.
This is May 2nd, your next meeting is what,
Yes.
May 8th?
Yeah, it's
May 13th.
So
13.
you wouldn't have any reservation if the grant application were submitted.
That's what.
No.
Super.
And it would be 10%. It's a
And right now
9%.
we have 10 letters of, I lost the word,
Support.
support.
Yeah.
And we've got one from Scott, including Scott Gray, waiting for one from Wazik. Joe is going to work on one when I give him enough information.
For this?
Yes,
We got one from the school superintendent.
yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think so. There's a push out there for them. Isn't there something in the newsletter also? Didn't Deb Parent put something
I
up
believe so.
for
Yeah.
letters of
Yes.
support?
Yeah.
So, I can't think of anything else that's, looks like a beautiful possibility. One of the things that I think is a plus is that it's the Office of Parks Recreation and Historic Preservation.
Oh,
And that's how I came across it, because I'm looking at historic preservation and thinking about that grant. But one of the things that Rob Campany from Fourth Coast said, it doesn't hurt to put your name out there, so Office of Parks and Recreation know that you're out there. And they know that there's a mill in this park and so forth. So we'll see if it works. I'm not real hopeful because of the LWRP. And so, not getting that, but we can put in that, we can resubmit that next time too. So. Anyway.
Thank you.
Super.
And if we need something, if you're having a meeting on April 29th, is that a special meeting? So if we did need something, could we do it on April 29th?
Yes. We could just love it. Another,
Other business has.
yeah, other business that might come before.
Yeah.
Okay,
We need a motion.
item number item number 3 is no longer on the table. Our next item is the Salt City tournament. Copy.
So then you just approve.
Frank, I think there was a note on there for you to mention. It was a yellow sticky.
On this one? It was, it came off.
Well, what is that? Is that the right one? The Salt City? He wanted to mention that, they have the New York State black bass permits already
Oh,
for their,
you know what, I had the wrong one, no. Yeah, from David Smith,
yes.
yeah, please note that they do have a New York State Black Bass permit. And so,
Do we just have to approve it? No, what do we do? I mean, it's a public.
it's to whom it may concern, it doesn't, this was a courtesy more than anything else.
Says I'm ready to request approval for Salt City Basketball.
So what, I mean, I think I know thing is on the personal side. There was some conflicts last year at the boat launch because these guys came in there and they just pretty much take over the boat launch. So I think this, and I know this particular group was there and they're the ones that had the biggest conflict down there. And they came in there and those guys were rude to the public, the local people. Yeah, and he didn't, you know, he totally, his guys were wrong. They,
from Syracuse.
he pulled them to the side, there was, and it was some, you know, decent residents here in the village that came to us and all that and said, you know, we don't require a permit. Some places, like, even over the state boat launch now in Black Lake, they have to file a permit
Oh,
with the park and recs that they're gonna use that boat launch for, just so people know that, okay, this weekend or this particular day, that this event is gonna be going on, expect that the boat launch will be busy. Whether you wanna put a permit fee on it or not, that's entirely up to the town.
where do they put the notice out so that they're aware?
So it's on the, I know like for Black Lake, it's on the DEC website in different
Okay,
places.
so what we could do is it could
Like
be-
our
It
website,
could be on our website and on that.
you know, if they gave us a disc, I know like. The junior Bassmasters, you know, they use it 2-3 times a year in the summer, and they do, I mean, it fills the place up, it's great, I mean, you know, like on the store, buy gas, buy food.
Does the
Well, I think
permit,
it just ought to reiterate that, you know, it can't be. Anything like last time.
I don't think that.
And I think when he called to speak, he did say, you know, last year we came, we didn't realize we didn't get permission to be here. We want to do it right this year. So he did acknowledge that they didn't get the approval.
We'll just try to accommodate if other boats are there to get in, you know, so that's probably what it was, right? People wanting to get in.
And who monitors that?
Well, that's,
Down here.
So I can respond. Yeah, I mean,
I think we just put a notice out there, you know, like. On the website, I mean, that little newsletter thing.
that
has been working
newsletter,
great.
yes.
You know, we're talking about that. you
And
know.
just tell this guy, I mean, go to this guy, I mean, we'll give you permission, it doesn't mean you can take over the place and boss the other voters.
Yeah. And I think a letter, we should draw up some letter and send it to the junior Bassmasters and then whoever else, you know. if you're
So
gonna
we
do
should
something.
give a little letter of engagement. This is what we
Yeah.
expect you to conduct yourself and where.
How many boats there be?
It's-
Is there a geographic?
They're tied to one side of the launch and not.
August
both sides.
24th.
Well, like I said, who's gonna watch it? Just put it on the website.
And don't we have an informational box down there too? Can't we put
Nice building.
we could put a flyer on there or something?
Meaning the bathroom,
Yeah.
the extra bathroom?
Yeah, it's easy.
Oh, I thought there was like one right there, like an informational,
There is. a
There
little-
is,
yeah.
a little kiosk.
Maybe we can just put something up there too.
Yeah, that's how we'll handle it. But I will respond to that and.
Oh, good.
The next item is this Stony Brook. In Stony's, it's a real liquor license notification. What do we need to do on that?
He's applied for his liquor license for outdoor seasonal establishment. It's going to be outdoors, roped off section on a patio or a deck. What they do, it's the same thing we do for Turner's. Whenever you apply for a liquor license, you just have to acknowledge by the town that you've done it. We just submit a letter saying it's been acknowledged and we approve.
Okay. Let's
It's a formality thing that the
let's
state
move
goes
forward
through.
with that. Now, no, that's.
No, that was
Well,
what
that's not
happened.
He's with John.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, monstrous.
Like a monstrous.
So. With
Why are we
that,
withdrawing?
shall we go into- Make a proposal, we go into executive session to address the.
And I have a say here.
Say, what do you want to say?
3 minutes,
Let's take it
3 minutes.
Oh, all right, so, we talked about, the requirements to block off the main street. And I'd like to get some kind of guidance on, you know, dimensions and such, what we were supposed to do to fulfill these, requirements. You know, like make a map or something, and you can tell us, like, we have to have a car or two at each side.
This is cars right across the lane, so, you know, blocking, so nobody can drive through into the crowd. So you more or less just pull a couple cars.
So listen, what we'll do is we'll put together, we'll do it, we'll run off a map, we'll put the perimeters in it and get it to you.
Okay, were we talking one time about not having a conference at the Red Barn or no?
No,
Yeah.
about them having them there.
What's the question here? Cause we're talking about traffic.
Right, that was at the last meeting or two, there was
And you said there's the
concerns of.
code
having-
concerns and stuff, we got into the talking with Chris Bay's property and whatever. And we talked about the concerts, cause they got land and stuff at the Red Barn.
But I think what they
You
said
did
is,
you miss that one?
I
I
think,
don't think Chris was here for that.
if I recall correctly, they talked about what they could do. Not in the short term, in the long term, doing something different. Yeah, so I thought this year they were going to try to address it by blocking it off, securing it. And then, I one-on-one suggested with, Faye's concern about them coming up on their property, that they, instead of, that tape, which anybody can duck in and out underneath, to get that plastic. What was it called, fencing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I want that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they should roll it down through there so that they can't cross and over onto their property. That's not that difficult, to put that many feet from there down through there.
Yeah, but isn't a public sidewalk in front of their house?
But it's that they were going up onto their back of the sidewalk
Yeah,
is what their issue was.
I think he's worried about that lawsuit that happened.
Well, I don't have
Happening
anything,
again, you know.
But anyways, that's a
I think
suggestion.
that's between them and the museum though, to keep the people off,
Well-
we shouldn't have anything to do with them.
No, we're not, but what I'm saying is I suggested that possible.
Oh.
Yeah.
Problem with the road part, if that's
Yeah,
what they still want
okay.
to do, but,
We're gonna lay.
and I have a book for you too, Rich, I was actually just got it today, it was a newer one.
We'll
For
lay out-
barriers and
Okay,
stuff.
and I got some signs, you know, that maybe, you know, there's, I would say they're official highway type approved signs saying road closed ahead and that sort of thing, and. You know, I tried to, steer the conversation and action, but. I guess I wasn't very forceful or something, and I've communicated to the board members that. You folks have said, you know, this has to be done in order to get this permission for the events to continue.
we'll get it, we'll get this, like a map and ink, so you'll have it for reference.
Okay, I just have to keep working on it, and I said that I would, so.
Okay, well, we'll have it to you, when is your next meeting?
Couple of days, but-
Tomorrow night.
I could do that tomorrow, I'll draw something up right now.
No.
But I-
Gary?
Listen, no, we're gonna run a common area.
Okay.
So we can do it on something more exact.
Well, you know, where is the other time to do this, I just, you know, we try to make sure
When's
that.
the first one?
Is he in the first?
When's the first one?
So July 5th.
Oh, sure, we got lots of time.
We'll have it for the following meeting.
I think so, yeah.
75.
You're gonna put your concerns in there, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
at least we brought some more at most.
Okay.
What I do.
Well, we just sit down and think down on it. We'll bring up.
Stay on flashbacks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rex.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care of your flood zone.
I didn't realize
I
it was
couldn't-
ridiculous.
I've worked for Patty for years there, and so when I.
Oh, but of course she didn't know.
No.
No, that's why I asked, do people know? Because she didn't know.
I,
The thing was built in 1949. I'm sure, no bank ever told her,
I
right?
think if the water got to that camp, I don't even know if Morristown.
She's got more of a chance coming from the up above her.
I will Xerox off the letter that he wrote. It really was lovely. I mean, it was just so powerful.
Larry?
Yeah, yeah, Larry Shepherd.
Yeah.
See you later.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's stuff.
Bye, Rick.
Just walk there for a minute. We're gonna make everybody leave.
I mean, you wanna call it?
Well,
Let me see.
it involves,
Right,
involves
Dean.
Dean.
Yeah.
Right,
I don't care if Lisa's here,
okay. Alright,
unless you guys care, I don't.
no. You gotta stop, and we're going on executive for personnel reasons, right?
Yes. So the motion has been made to go into executive session. Do we have a second?